I wish you bluebirds in the spring to hear your song, a song to sing, and then a kiss. More than this, I wish you love.
Welcome to the Forgiveness Solution Podcast. I'm Reverend Misty Tyme. You can find me at revmisty.com. Please send me your forgiveness questions at revmisty@outlook.com. And I would love to get your forgiveness stories. I'd love to share them. Thank you for joining us today. I am honored and I am so excited about today's show because we get to really talk about forgiveness in not just the Christian religion, but we get to talk about Buddhism today. I'm an interfaith reverend, and I've mentioned that a few times. What is an interfaith reverend? Well, an interfaith reverend studies all major religions. Yes, Christianity is my home faith, but I got to tip my toes into other religions. So I honor everyone that comes from all different backgrounds. And I honor you, and thank you for joining me today. So today, we get to be honored by Sister Kihn Nigiem. So I'm going to mess that up. I'm so sorry. So I'm going to have you jump in and say your name appropriately so I don't mess it up.
Kihn Nigiem.
Oh, see, now you guys can probably see why I messed that up. So I'm going to ask for a little bit of grace. I love how it is translated because it is translated into adorned with true reverence. I mean, who wouldn't want that? I would love to have my name translated into something like that. That's just so beautiful. Sister, she was born and raised in San Diego, and at 14 was ordained as a Buddhist nun in the Plum Village Tradition by Thich Nhat, and received a full ordination in 2001 in the formal transmission of Thich Nhat in 2006, and is a certified Dhamma teacher of the Plum Village. Very interesting. You actually lived in France for 12 years and is recently back in San Diego at Deer Park Monastery, which is a beautiful monastery here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that monastery because if you're ever near San Diego, you can actually visit the monastery and go up and have a day there and have a mindful day. And we're going to get more into that. As we get started, can you tell us a little bit more about your amazing path in life?
When I went to my first retreat ever, I went because my mother made me go.
Like most mothers, we love to make our children do things.
Yeah, and what happened was I was reluctant and I had no idea what peace was about, no idea what meditation. I was a typical Californian teenager and just busy with school and friends and normal things. My mother persuaded me, if you go to this retreat, you'll get a week off of school.
Oh, well, that would do it for me. And most of my kids.
Yeah. And so I said, okay, so I just go to this retreat, get whatever homework I need to get done. And then I went to the retreat. And then she then said, why don't you go and listen to the lectures? And I was like, are you serious? I'm not going to understand what this guy is saying. I say that as a teenage mind. This guy is my teacher now, Hanh, because he was so old and, there's no relationship, there's no connection between him. I wouldn't get what he's going to say. And at that time, I had no idea of meditation or peace wasn't even in my vocabulary.
So your parents didn't practice at that time?
Well, they did. But they didn't impose. My mother attended every single retreat he offered in California or in the United States. But it always landed when I had school or I had sports activities and I couldn't make it. And so this time she persuaded me because the retreat was specifically for teenagers and young adults. And she wanted me to go. So being as obedient as I can, without seeming to be rebellious or anything like that, I went to the retreat and I sat in the hall, intending to just sit in the hall and do my homework in the back of the hall. Until my mother said, since you're in the hall, why don't you just sit in front? And I'm like, I'm going to fall asleep. He's going to speak for 3 hours. I'm going to fall asleep. And that's embarrassing. And she said, just sit there. I'm like, can I do my homework? And he's like, no, you're just going to sit there and listen to him. I didn't want to fight it, because everybody else was around and sitting quietly, and so I sat still for 2 hours. Of course, I fidgeted here and there and just was really bored out of my brains, but to my amazement, I found myself understanding everything that he was telling me. And it was like an eye-opener. He spoke about living in the present moment, on how we always run after things in the future. We're wanting to have this and wanting to have that. We're working so hard to have a brand new car or to have a big house. And then when we do have that and we see that our neighbors have a better car, we want that, and we can't enjoy the fact that we already have a beautiful home or anything else, or even with our loved ones that we take for granted that our mother is always going to be there, our father and a sister, and by the time everybody goes to college, they have their own family, and then you're left by yourself without ever realizing you never spent enough time with them. And so that, for me, was an eye-opener, because at that time, honestly, I did not have any intention, and any teenager in their right mind, what I would say, would not have any intention of becoming a monk or a nun for their occupation. And I was heading towards making the American dream for myself. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to get into Harvard Divinity or Harvard Law School. I had this whole dream that I wanted to do. And when he said that, living in the present moment and being happy with what I have right now and taking care of the things that I have right now, it just sort of made me stop and reflect back on my life. Wait a minute. My mother was not doing so well physically at that time, and I took it for granted. It was just like, oh, she's sick. She had the flu. But I never even thought about it, like something else could happen. And I guess with like most teenagers would think that moms are supposed to love you. It's supposed to happen. Right. I don't really think of it, of like, how am I supposed to love my mother back in return, or to be grateful for that love, because I expected it. Like, she's supposed to cook for me, she's supposed to do my laundry, she's supposed to do everything, because that's what moms are for. That first talk that he gave took me back to reflecting on myself. So how am I actually living my life right now in this present moment? And, I didn't say much, because I thought it was all weird. Contemplating, it was like a very foreign area for me. So it was just there. And then I carried on with all my other stuff after the talk. And then the next day comes again, and he speaks about suffering. When he's speaking about suffering, I'm sort of like, I don't suffer. What can I suffer from as a 14-year-old?
And an American teenager.
Right. Like, the only thing that I'm suffering from is if my mom won't let me go to the mall.
Right, exactly.
Or things like that. So it was like, I just need to throw a fit. I just need to do something, and then I wouldn't suffer anymore. It's not something deep down. But I did at that time, because in that whole suffering topic, he spoke about nowadays how children or teenagers and young adults commit suicide, or they have unprotected sex, or they cope with their difficulties through sex or through drugs
drinking,
or alcohol and all of this other stuff. And at that time, for me, I was 14, I did have a friend that committed suicide. I did have friends that were doing drugs. I did have friends that were sexually active, and we were all 14, 15. Wow. But it never occurred to me that it was because they were suffering. I was like the absent-minded teenager, sort of thinking that, okay, well, that's your choice in life. I mean, it's stupid. You're still my friend, but I wouldn't do that. But, oh, well, that's your business. It's your choice. Like, I had my choice where I want to study and to become a lawyer. They have their choice of how they want to use. I never thought for one moment that they were having a difficult time, that they were having problems and issues that they didn't know how to deal with. And it wasn't until this retreat where I realized that. Like, wow, I didn't know that my friend was suffering from so much anger towards his parents. I mean, I knew why he committed suicide and what he wanted to do and the reason why he did that. But it just never occurred to me that it was so deep down, and he felt that the only way to inflict harm or pain and suffering to the parents for inflicting pain and suffering on him was to commit suicide. And so that woke me up, and I realized that I, as a friend or so-called friend to my friends, was never really a friend deep enough or strong enough to fully understand where my friends are coming. You know, like, it sort of became like I have all these friends, and it's like a popularity kind of thing where how many number of people that know you at school, but it wasn't a deep enough friendship where we can trust one another. And at that retreat, I reflected on my role that I may have unintentionally contributed to his passing, or even to my friend's sexual activity. And she was pregnant at the age of 14, and we were invited to her baby shower. And we were 14-year-olds.
Right.
You know, it was just sort of something like, okay, let's just come together.
It doesn't even seem real at that age, right? You're just,
right.
It's hard because the maturity isn't there to really see in depth what that really means to a life.
Right.
When you're that age.
Right. So it was all happening so fast for me, and I never really took the time to reflect upon it. It was sort of like, okay, that's your choice. Whatever, you're still my friend, I respect you and your decisions. But it was never like, how can I help you? I never opened myself up to that because I was so focused on things that I wanted to do for myself. And during that whole talk, the lecture that Thich gave, he helped me understand more deeply the roots of suffering, of how, we don't communicate, and how our misperception about one thing can lead to a lot of suffering. And he helped me see the different channels or the different paths we can use in order to take care of our suffering or take care of our emotions that are empowering us or taking over our lives. And I realized at that moment, sitting in that hall, like, there's a different way to deal with certain things. There's a different way to deal with anger. There's a different way to deal with depression. There's a different way to deal with everything else that all these teenagers go through, but I only identify as anger.
Right.
Because that's basically, they don't know anything. They just lash out. They're depressed, and they would just lash out, and that frustration, that sadness, that despair is always expressed through anger, and they think they're just an angry person. And I sat there realizing that I am so lucky to be the only person in my school at this retreat. And that was just when, like, everything inside of me, like, wow, there's a different path, that I don't have to go the conventional path, thinking that I have so limited choices of what I can do with my life, or what's,
What was that first talk with your mother like when you realized that?
I never told her.
You didn't tell her.
I mean, teenagers and mothers.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. Yeah. I have a teenage daughter.
Yeah, and we don't talk. It's just sort of like, you give me my space, I give you yours. I won't give you any problems. And so I never told my mother what I was thinking or what was happening through my head until the last talk that Thich spoke about impermanence, that everything is impermanence. Yet we live as everything will always stay the same.
But nothing stays the same.
Nothing stays the same. And if there's something that we want to do, we should do it now. Don't wait until tomorrow. But he was saying that if there's something that you want to say to your loved one, take the time to do it now. You tell your mother that you love her. Tell your father that you love him. Tell your friends that you love them. Do it now, because you never know what tomorrow is going to bring. And so I sat there thinking, everything that he said made so much sense, logically sense, for a teenager like me, or just like anybody else, to say, yeah, I get it. It just makes logic sense, because for teenagers, you can explain to them, you say, this is good, and you can say, you should do this, but they won't do it until it makes sense in their own language. And everything made perfect sense for me. And when he says, everything changes, life isn't permanent. Do what you got to do now. Don't wait until later. I said, that's it. I'm going to be a nun. But I had no idea what being a nun was about. I had no idea that I had to shave my head. I had no idea that I would wear the same wardrobe every single day.
And right now you just said two things to a teenage girl that would probably be the biggest startling things.
Right.
I mean...
Right.
Right.
Makeup, hair, boyfriend, no husband, no kids.
Wow.
None of that. And I had no idea. But the only thing, sort of like that passion and that drive that I had at that moment is like, I felt so lucky to see that I had so many other choices in life. And I wanted to help my friends.
You had a life of service all of a sudden. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to help my friends see that they don't have to go to the advertised or the conventional way. That there are other ways that they can deal with their problems without having to go through sex or having to do drugs or suicide or alcohol, any of that. And there's a more wholesome way, more meaningful way to take care of their issues. And without second thought, that came at I guess in September or mid-September. I only went to, October, beginning of October. I went to 9th grade for couple of weeks, and then by Halloween I was already in France.
Wow.
And 3 months
So there
later,
had to be a talk with your mom there sometime.
Yes. Okay, so that becomes another story. When I went to tell my mom that I wanted to become a nun, she didn't say anything. My sisters, I have, we're 4 siblings, and I'm the third, and my 2 elder sisters said, why don't you finish high school and go? I said, no, I don't want to. Not that I wanted to get out of school, but no. And I was stubborn, because I had my own attitude thing. And then my dad said, why don't you wait until you finish high school? I agree with your sisters. And I said, you know what Thich said? He said, everything is impermanence. If I die tomorrow or in 2 weeks' time and I never get to become a nun, it's going to be on your plate.
Well, you can't, how do you argue with a daughter that is that absolutely determined? I mean,
so he said,
with a calling.
You do whatever you want to do, that's it. And then when I came to my mother, of course by then everything had to be arranged for me to go. My mother said, I don't want to have any say in that. It's your decision. You're old enough to be responsible for your decision. So whether you decide to go or not to go is your sole responsibility. Because I don't want you to say after 5 years or 6 years or even 2 years of becoming a nun that you felt pressured by me in any way.
I understand your mom's point of view.
Yeah. And so she said, you're on your own. I would support whatever decision you make, but you are responsible. Mm-hmm. So, and I've always been that person in the house where I was very independent. I didn't have to lean on anybody,
I think your mother probably knew that. Yeah.
So yes. So that's how I came to the practice. Totally just dropped me in the middle of the retreat, and then, and then everything happened so fast that I didn't even have a chance to reflect or wait a minute, am I doing the right thing? Am I missing out? A lot of my friends now, we still keep in contact, and they said, you know what? You didn't miss out on anything. You actually lived life to the fullest. By the age of 21, I have traveled to so many different countries and led so many different retreats here and there and been everywhere. And while they're still struggling with student loans, But it was and my friends had interviewed me because they were writing papers of religious papers and things like that, and they had a friend that was a Buddhist nun, so that was the best. And they, after talking to me, they would be like, you know what, you didn't miss out on anything. And sometimes, people would ask me if I missed anything. I said, I wouldn't know what's out there to miss. Yes. If you're talking about prom, not really. If you're talking about high school graduation,
you've been through many you've had an ordination, you've had many ceremonies to make up for one high school graduation.
Yeah. Yes. And so it was, I didn't have any desire or anything that I felt that I needed to fulfill, to look like I had a normal life. And I just felt complete.
What a beautiful, beautiful story about such a calling, and what a beautiful thing to say, because we've all been that teenager. We've all been that teenager with that angst and that pain. Puberty automatically instills that. I think that's part of puberty. But then in today's society, we see so many people reaching out through pain, reaching through other things to try to solve it. And what a beautiful way to say the answer is so much easier and simple of reaching inside. And that was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing such a magical, wonderful story. And then you went to France and you learned and you deeply immersed yourself in Buddha's teachings, yes. Correct?
Yes.
And I am so excited that now we get to hear from you on those beautiful teachings. And when I said earlier, I touched my toes, I mean, just barely touched my toes into Buddha's teachings, and they deeply touched my heart. I couldn't even imagine how you were able to immerse yourself in what you get to share with us today. And we are the forgiveness solution, so we are going to talk about forgiveness. And I was able to go back into my books and look a little bit further, and I came upon one little story, and it was about one monk talking to another monk, and the monks were both imprisoned, and it was years later when they had come out, and the one monk said, "Have you forgiven your captors?" And the one monk said, "I'll never forgive them." And the other monk said, "Well, then you must still be in prison." And I thought that was a perfect story, because I talk a lot about unforgiveness jail and the fact that when you don't forgive, who is really still in jail? You are. Because many times the person that you're holding the ugly emotions over doesn't even know. They're off living their life, or even if they know that you're upset with them, it's really inside of you that you have these feelings. And I was wondering if you could share with us some of your teachings, a little bit more deeper than my little story, about forgiveness and unforgiveness and what that really does to us.
Yesterday I was reflecting about forgiveness, and I was thinking, because a lot of people have asked me, how can I forgive? And I've many times shared with others is that the only reason we cannot forgive is because of that pain and that suffering that has been inflicted on us from what action or inaction the other person has towards us. Like you said, that is not about them, it's everything that's inside. One of the things that I find for a lot of people it's difficult to forgive the other one is because they don't know if he or she can trust that person again. So it's a lot about trusting. But then it's also at the same time not trusting that person, but trusting yourself. And I was reflecting and looking deeply, and I realized in Buddhism we do have a method of practice to reflect upon ourselves. And we call it the 4 immeasurable minds.
4 immeasurable minds?
Yes. The 4 immeasurable minds. The first one is loving kindness.
Loving kindness, yes.
And second is compassion.
Compassion.
Joy is the third.
Joy.
And equanimity.
Equanimity.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the 4th. And, some people think compassion. When you think of compassion, and you're in a state of having to forgive another person or wanting to forgive. And a lot of people think of having compassion as sort of like having pity on that person. Like, oh, I'm so sorry you went through that. But for me, how I see compassion is not about just feeling pity, but doing something to help alleviate that pain and having compassion for yourself.
Oh, beautiful, yes. Having
compassion for yourself is not throwing yourself a pity party. Yeah? Like, I'm just gonna sit and not be sober for whatever. Just gonna sit in a quiet room and lock myself up and feel compassion for myself. But compassion is basically being aware of the suffering that is there, the hurt and the pain that is there, and doing something to get out of it, and not allowing yourself to be in that slump. So in reflecting with forgiveness in oneself, not forgiving the exterior conditions, but forgiving from inside, you can call the suffering or whatever pain or despair that you have and look at it with compassion. And how can we look at it with compassion is to understand it. Where did that pain actually come from? So sometimes I'm going to use the example of anger. I may have said something or done something to you that made you angry. I did not take anger from outside and make you wear it. The anger came from inside. And
I chose it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that goes with the same thing. You can look back at where did that anger come from?
Came from my expectation that you would do something different.
Right. And that would be your way of projecting. But also anger comes from something deep inside that's been bottled up. Sort of like you may have let it go once, let it go twice, let it go 3 times, and the 4th time
I'm done.
But it's like a time bomb.
Right.
And you never dealt with that time bomb. You never took the time to diffuse it. And so that just became bigger and bigger into an atomic bomb or a nuclear bomb. And so that's the way that we practice with compassion for oneself, is having the capacity to look deeply inside, to see the roots of where that pain and suffering is coming from. And in relation to that, in relation to seeing the roots, there's another practice where we call the Four Noble Truths.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Suffering, the causes of suffering, joy, and what leads to joy, like the end of suffering and the path leading to end of suffering. But our teacher, he says he doesn't want everything, all Four Noble Truths, to be suffering. So he says suffering, the awareness that suffering exists, the path leading to suffering. Because everything needs food. You need food to grow. Happiness needs food to grow. Joy needs food to grow. Everything that you feed.
So you have to choose what you're going to feed.
Right. And at the same time, if you know you have anger, maybe you can look backwards and to see what is feeding your anger. It could be you're playing video games, Game of the Thrones, or watching all these violent movies that subconsciously water the seeds of anger. And you see that action on the TV screen, and then that's your automatic response to it. So it's sort of like, in order to forgive yourself or to forgive the other person, you have to work backwards.
That's a very good point.
To finding the source.
And if you're working backwards to find why you're so upset and unforgiving someone else, you have to see why you're so angry at them. What were you expecting from them? And many times I say, do they have the will or did they have the skill to meet your expectation? And when you figure out that maybe they didn't have the skill to meet what it is that you wanted from them, and that's why you were so angry at them. And then when you realize that they weren't able to meet your need for whatever reason, that was about them, you could all of a sudden let in some compassion and some empathy. Unforgiveness kind of goes away and your anger lessens, understanding a little bit more.
Right. Using compassion as looking deeply and sort of peeling off certain layers and working backwards, going down to the core. I'm going to jump back to the Four Noble Truths where it says suffering and the path leading to suffering. We already mentioned that we all know and acknowledge suffering exists.
Yes.
And the path leading to suffering, things that you do, that you consume, how you live your life in terms of edible foods, indigestion, volition, consciousness, all of the kinds of foods that you take in through your eyes, ears, and nose, tongue, and your own determination, your own will, can also lead to suffering. The ways of consumption, your sensory impressions, your volitions, your consciousness, and edible foods can lead to suffering. So if you're able to recognize that there is suffering, then you can dig a little bit deeper to recognize the conditions that brings about suffering or the foods that bring about suffering. And when you're able to recognize, for example, if you have lung cancer and you know that smoking is a very crucial element that causes lung cancer. Knowing that, anybody in their right mind, knowing that what causes that lung cancer would then try all they can to take away, to stop smoking.
Right.
So the same thing, that is the path leading to joy, leading to the end of suffering, which is the fourth noble truth. And so then you have, it's sort of like you have two opposites. You have suffering, path leading to suffering, and then you have joy, because it's like the opposite, and the path leading to joy. The joy is to have healthy lungs, and how to have healthy lungs is to quit smoking. And so the Four Noble Truth does just that. So if you're able to look deeply into your anger or to your unforgiveness, and you sort of peel back, and you see all the causes and conditions that are there. And the most important thing is to be honest. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we're not honest with ourselves. Others, it's okay.
Oh, yes. I can see other people's problems much better than I can see my own.
Yeah. Yes. And the thing is that we're always in denial of ourselves because we have a perception about ourselves.
Yes.
Good or bad. And so then the most important thing is when you're looking at your suffering or your unwillingness to forgive, you have to be honest and to say to yourself. And then, of course, there will be a lot of tears that will come up, a lot of emotions that will come up, but allow them to. And then when you see that, it's just a sense of release. And then you can look deeper and peeling off those layers, and then going down to causes of those suffering, causes of that forgiveness. What are you still holding on internally? And then, knowing all of that, listing all of those things down, then you can look on the other side. What would make you happy as a person, and how to bring about that happiness. So I think one of the elements that can help us to forgive a little bit easier, and not that to forgive 100%, because it's a whole lifetime process, but to forgive a little bit more, is to practice having compassion for yourself. Before using the other person as the object of your compassion, having compassion for yourself. You got to look deep down inside. And then loving kindness. Loving kindness in the Sanskrit word is Maitri. Maitri means friend. To be a friend unto oneself. To be a friend to yourself. Because it's easy to be friends with others. But you are your best criticizer. You criticize yourself the best.
Oh, yes, we
critic.
do.
You're your own critic. And you cannot accept things that go wrong within yourself. You beat yourself down. You say, I can't accept this. I can't accept that. And that also then makes it very difficult for you to forgive. Because you have this anger, but you're in total denial that you have this anger. You don't like it, you don't have it, and you just shun it off like that. And you just sort of like put a cover over it and let it collect dust. And you're not taking care of that. So being a friend to yourself, having loving kindness, having Maitri for yourself is another tool that we can use to bring about forgiveness.
That is so wonderful. And to think about going backwards and peeling backwards and seeing why we're holding the unforgiveness, I think is really the key. And to look deep inside and be a friend to yourself. And you said it so beautifully, and what a beautiful teaching. When you sit and you have a meditation, do you do you think about that in your meditation, or when you clear and you sit and have a meditation? I was reading some of your teacher's meditations, and he had a specific meditation for that, and that's what I was kind of trying to get to. That was so beautiful. I'm still overwhelmed with it, like I'm even teary over it. That was so amazing, and I would want to ask you about a specific meditation that we could look up or go to for that. Do you know any that we could look up? Or
Well, our teacher has a book
okay,
called The Blooming of a Lotus.
oh, The Blooming of a Lotus.
Blooming of a Lotus.
Okay, great.
And in that book,
Mm-hmm.
there are, I think, about 40 different exercises
Okay.
for meditation. Of course, there's the beginner, and then you go on into looking deeper and deeper and deeper into yourself.
Self.
And so it's a quite popular book, and we use that all the time to introduce beginners to meditation, and even people who have been meditating for a while, because it's sort of like a guideline. It's a guided meditation, and you can get
Beautiful.
that online. There's a story that I would like to tell you. I've been practicing for almost 20 years, and when I first ordained, my best friend, he came to me and he said, "You are the last person on earth I would ever believe would become a nun." And I said, "I know, right?" Because she's like, "You're so mean."
You're mean?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sitting across from her right now, and I'm telling you, she's the last person I would say was mean.
I mean, it was because I always put up this front, and I realized this later on, is that I always put up this hardcore shell that no one's gonna pick on me, because if you pick on me, you're gonna be sorry, kind of thing. Is because I have so much vulnerability in myself, and I've always put up this front to protect me and what I identify as a strong person. But there was one time as monastics, we're very limited to what we can do for fun. And it was, we have at our monastery a day we call Lazy Day. And I think this is very important for everybody to have a lazy day.
Oh, lazy days are very important. Yes.
There's no program, you can just do what you want to do, practice sitting meditation on your own. So myself and a group of younger sisters, we decided we wanted to have a laugh. And our game got a little bit on the wild side, but it's not like any other game. We're playing charades.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so, I mean, that's like the wild part, all of these sisters quietly meditating. We have these sisters jumping around and doing cartwheels and things like that. But it was a set-up game, because we wanted one particular sister to do cartwheels. And we were just pretending and guessing everything else but what she was doing. So it was rigged, and we were just having the time of our lives, because we were just watching this elderly nun try to do a cartwheel. But we were having so much fun, and then all of a sudden we hear from across the hallway another sister yell at us and say, "You guys are too loud!" In a very unkind way, she said, "Be quiet. You guys are too loud." And it came at such that we felt afraid and fearful, and all of the sisters, and for me at that time, I wasn't afraid. I was like, "Who do you think you are?" I mean, we have all the right to do what we're doing, because there's no rules today, But I didn't say anything. I was just having this bottled up anger inside of me. "Are you using your authority over me?" And all of that. And then the younger sisters, because I'm considered an elder, the younger sisters said, "Oh, just forget it. Just forget it. Let's just put everything away and go to our room and read a book and be quiet." I was like, no, why do we have to be quiet? And it's just one person. Nobody else seems to be complaining that they're hearing laughter in the nunnery. And it happened at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And so we sort of dispersed, and I went into my room, and I live with other sisters too, but I wasn't the quietest person. I mean, I didn't say anything. I was just banging my cup and having tea and just thinking about it. I was just so angry at why she was doing that. What's the reason? Was she jealous that she was not included? And all of these scenarios are to come up in my head. And the sister was like, just forget it. Just forget it. Who cares about her? I was like, no, I care because it affects me so much. It sort of felt like I couldn't express myself. And, you know, we went to dinner at 8, and I have to say that, honestly, I wasn't mindful because I kept on trying to figure out what went wrong.
Well, isn't that what we do when we get upset? We run it through our heads. Yeah. We run the story over and over, trying to change our yesterday. That's what I would say. You're trying to change our yesterday, trying to run the story over and over again.
And trying to figure it out.
Right.
But then I realized the more I hit replay, the angrier I got. Because you can't figure it out.
Right. Because it doesn't change.
No. Right.
The story doesn't change.
It's just, I got so angry. And so it came to dinner and then, you know, taking a shower, doing my toiletries, and go to sleep. Every day at the monastery, we wake up at 5. 10 o'clock, 10:30ish is about the normal time we turn off our lights to go to sleep. If we have meditation in the morning. So we wake up at 5. And I was like, you know, in my head I was like, just forget it. Go to sleep. I gotta wake up tomorrow morning at 5. And I'm ready to go to bed. I'm laying in my bed. And I'm just lying there. And I'm still hitting replay. Unconsciously. And my mind is consciously saying, go to sleep. Go to sleep. And there was this whole argument that was happening. And I was criticizing myself. Why am I letting this affect me? Why am I... And I turned around and I looked at my clock. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I was like, okay, no, this is ridiculous. You gotta go to sleep. Sister Kihn Nigiem, you gotta go to sleep. And you only have a few more hours before sitting meditation. And then I continued to be tossing and turning. I looked at my clock and it was 3 in the morning. And I said, this is so ridiculous. And I know all of the practices. I know that I'm supposed to come back to my breathing. I know I'm supposed to relax and calm myself. But it just didn't work. None of it worked because I was so enraged. Because I could not understand. But the one thing that I did that helped me to fall asleep eventually without even trying to was I put my right hand on my heart and my left hand on my stomach. And I was breathing and I said, I am sorry. I am sorry for putting you through this. Putting my physical body through this anger.
Compassion for yourself.
Compassion for myself. And at that moment, I felt such release that I started to cry. And I felt that my body had forgiven me. Because we think anger or sadness or despair is something that happens mentally or emotionally. But our body is the one that holds it and has to endure it. For every millisecond that you are angry, a drop of chemical reaction that your brain releases, a type of hormone, gets into your bloodstream, and it takes 26 minutes to detox that. So I have been angry from 3 o'clock in the afternoon all the way to 3 in the morning. That's 12 hours of all these toxins my body was holding for me. And having to filter all of that twice full. And at that time I realized that I was clenching my teeth. My hands were in a fist. And my body was so tense. But when I came back to my body, it didn't have to go through my emotional self or my logical self anymore. My physical body, just putting my hand on my heart and breathing. I'm so sorry that I'm putting you through this. I felt at that very instant, my shoulders just completely melted. My hands opened and I cried.
Oh.
I just cried. A couple of tears. I wasn't sobbing, but it's just like a release of all this tightness that I held in my neck and in my chest. Just fell, and I cried, and then within 5 minutes I fell asleep. And at that time that I felt my body has forgiven me. So it's not about forgiving mentally or emotionally also, but forgiving from your body, taking care of your body. So when I do sitting meditation, the most important thing that our teacher has taught is that before any healing or transformation can take place, we need to make sure that we're healthy enough, we're happy enough in order to do that. And that happiness will become the source or the willpower to transform and to heal. Because if you're not healthy, no matter what you do, if you're not healthy yet, and you're not taking your medication or whatever it is, you're not taking supplements to give your body a boost, no matter how much you run, how much you jog, you still feel drained.
Correct.
And so taking care of your body first, then having to do something else. When you're happy enough, then you have enough nutriments or supplements to take care of the deeper, dirtier kind of stuff that you have.
To get. That was so beautiful that I'm going to remember that when I'm feeling that anger and that sadness, to give myself compassion, to put my hand on my heart and my other hand on my stomach and tell myself I'm sorry and it's okay, and to give myself the compassion, because sometimes I do feel even disappointed with myself for having those feelings, and to feel, that was beautiful. Everyone out there, please know what a special guest we have today and how unbelievably honored that I am, and I hope you are, for having Sister here with us today. And it has just been a beautiful time. Very, very special that we were able to talk about forgiveness and unforgiveness, but in a different way than we usually ever get to talk about it. And please send me your questions, because this right now, this very special moment doesn't happen very often. We don't get to have these types of teachings with somebody who is so amazing and deeply, deeply knowledgeable. So thank you so much. From the Forgiveness Solution, and from me personally, I want to thank you deep from my heart for taking the time to be with us today.
It's my pleasure to be here to share my practice.
I'm just really, really thankful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today on the Forgiveness Solution, and please subscribe on the Sacred Stories podcast. And you can find me at Reverend Misty at Facebook and also on reverendmisty.com. Thank you so much.
I wish you bluebirds in the spring to hear your song, a song to sing, and then a kiss. More than this, I wish you love.